So this battle, the period of 1903 to 1914 saw women most active in their fight. They were out there. An example of this is in 1908, 25,000 women met in London's Hyde Park to hear about female suffrage. It's a beautiful park, Hyde Park. If you ever go to London, you'll have to go through Hyde Park. And there they have something called the Speaker's Corner where people could stand up and speak. And so the women went there because it was a public space, and they talked about their movement and what it is they wanted to accomplish. Men went there too, and some men did go there to support their wives and their daughters and the movement for women altogether. Other men went there to just kind of laugh and ridicule the women. Um, you know, they would argue that they humiliated them. They would basically say that, you're not real women. Real women don't get involved in politics. But this didn't do a lot to really stop this group who came to be known as the suffragists. So they would continue on this fight, but things are going to start to escalate a couple years later. The point that is often seen as the place where escalation begins is November the 18th, 1910. This day will be known, within this feminist movement as Black Friday. So on this day, suffragists marched on Parliament because there was a vote by the House of Commons to allow women to vote, and it gets turned down. So the suffragists go out there. They go out there in a large group. They march down the street where they're met by the police. And this is going to lead to a confrontation which is going to last for 6 hours, where these unarmed women are going to battle the police who are going to hold their ground. The police order them to return home, but the women relentlessly push forward. And, in turn, the police, we're told, if these women want to have the equal rights of men, treat them like you would the men. So, large numbers of women were injured in this encounter. A number of women were also arrested. And this really kind of lights the fuse on this era of extreme violence. This new group who was willing to use violence came to be known as the suffragettes by the press. So you have the suffragists who are fighting for women to have the vote, and then you have the suffragettes, and they were the women who were willing to, commit all of these other violent acts. A couple of examples of this is, we have these suffragettes setting fire to mailboxes or filling them up with jam or glue. Now, you have to remember, at this period of time, your mailbox was your main source of communication. People were writing letters back and forth, just like today we send texts back and forth. So messing with the mail system really kind of gummed up the system. I was going to say jammed up the system, but it really did, because you did have lots of important correspondence going through. And they're not picking the mailboxes, by the way, of just everyday people. They're going after government officials. So this is impeding, government. It's kind of a very passive act, but it's a very effective one. They're going to escalate even more. They're going to throw bombs into the country homes of those members of parliament who were against women having the vote. They started a campaign where they went into the National Gallery and started to slash the paintings of men who had positions of power in government and the monarchy. They're going to start setting fires to hotels, public buildings, and even churches. And this is going to cause a greater level of frustration to occur amongst these women because nothing seems to be happening. There are even stories of groups of women going to the homes of members of parliament, knocking on the door, and the men, these male members of parliament would come out and they'd throw a blanket over him and they'd start to beat him with their umbrellas or with their purses or, punching and kicking them and then running away. the movement itself is going to have one martyr, one really kind of important moment occurs when one of these suffragettes, a very active one, we know that she, participated in the bombings. We know that she participated in the acts of violence and arson. Was a woman by the name of Emily Wilding Davidson, and she seemingly took her own life in an act of protest when on Derby Day in 1913 she threw herself in front of the king's horse. And this was seen as the symbolic act. She was the symbol of women everywhere whose rights had been trampled by the ultimate in male patriarchy, the king, and that was in the form of his horse. And so she really kind of became this focal point of how far women were willing to go. Now, I do need to say, thanks to modern technology, there is some evidence which suggests that Davidson perhaps didn't intend to give her life for the cause. And I'm going to include a link in the comments section for this video where we present this evidence. But I mean, what the new thought was is that she wasn't trying to get trampled by the horse. She was in fact trying to put a scarf with the colors and the message of the suffragettes on the horse, so that when it crossed the finish line, it would be the symbol for the movement. And unfortunately, she just wasn't in the right place, and the horse kind of got a little spooked, and it ended up running over her. As the militancy of the suffragettes increased, the law became less tolerant of their actions. So in the beginning of the movement, the police were more unwilling to be violent towards, this mainly middle-class group of women. This really went against Victorian etiquette on how men and women are supposed to behave towards each other. But as the suffragettes increased their levels of violence, the police did start to act more harshly towards them. The suffragettes were doing everything they could to get their message out there and to make a real political protest. One tactic that they employed was going on hunger strikes when they were imprisoned. Now, I'm going to warn you, the police are going to act. They can't have, these upper class women dying. So they employed a very extreme tactic. They started to force feed the women. So they would clamp open the jaws of these women, and they would pour a gruel or an oatmeal-like substance down their throats. This obviously caused a lot of women to bring that back up. So they wanted to make sure that food got right to their stomach. So they started to employ hoses or tubes, which would be inserted through the mouth down the throat. Now, this tactic was seen by the public as being extremely harsh, and I mean it is. So it gained a lot of protest by the men in these women's lives, even though some of these men may not have agreed with their daughters, wives, mothers, aunts, whoever was protesting. They didn't want to see them go through this kind of harsh treatment. So they had to change the way in which they did this. So to prevent the hunger strikes, the government passes something called the Cat and Mouse Act in 1913. So basically, women who were on these hunger strikes were released from prison, sent home, where they would be nursed back to health. They would resume eating, and then when they were healthy again, they would resume their prison sentence. And the idea is the time would just continually be tacked on at the end. This could take, a very small sentence of a couple of months and extend it into years. The other thing that is that the women, when they were imprisoned, would face, abuse by the guards, and this also would work against the government's message because, more and more stories were getting out there. So, things were kind of starting to get to a boiling point. And, the movement's going to come to a very quick end, though, when World War One breaks out in 1914. This question of, should women have the vote is put aside for doing what was best for the nation. And the one thing is, women within Britain would quickly sign up to help with the war effort, taking jobs in factories as nurses, and really kind of promoting and supporting their nation. And for this, women would get a limited vote in 1918 in Britain, and a full vote by 1923. And this is going to bring an end to this wave of feminism in England, because now women had a vote, women are going to get more of a voice, and that's why a vote is extremely important. Um, we are going to see women in France, Germany, and in Canada gain a vote as well during or just after the war. It would take women in the United States until 1920, whereas here in Canada, women would gain a limited vote in 1917. Now, it's really important to note that these women's movements were really kind of an international phenomenon. And the rise of this political consciousness kind of occurred in Western countries almost at the same time amongst the middle class. The 20th century is going to see a number of different waves within feminism and a lot of changes within that movement. But one thing that kind of is at the heart of it is fighting for the rights of women and to ensure that we have that equality. And it really is the responsibility of each and every one of us, no matter what our gender, no matter what our political belief, to recognize the value in having this equality. So the fight of those suffragettes is still a fight that goes on today, and it's one that we should all be a part of, because when women are equal to that of men, we're all going to be better off for it in the end. And with that, today's lecture is history. Bye.